High levels of purpose, kindness, collaboration, and strong leadership in an organization can generate a certain kind of magic that can elevate an entire community, as you'll discover through this conversation with Matt VanAuken, President and CEO of Developmental Pathways, on this episode of Making Our World Better.
Welcome to the Making Our World Better podcast, where you will find motivation and encouragement through lively conversations with inspirational people who every day are making our world a better place. Now, here's your host, Jay Clark.
Welcome to the podcast. I am Jay Clark, and I am thrilled to welcome Matt VanAuken, Executive Director and CEO of the awesome Developmental Pathways, an organization that supports individuals of all ages with disabilities. Matt brings more than 20 years of executive leadership and management experience to Developmental Pathways. He has served in several state and local capacities to advance services for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities in Colorado, most recently as a governor-appointed member and president of the Colorado State Board of Health from 2015 to 2019. He also serves as the Colorado Board Representative for the American Network of Community Options and Resources, a nationwide trade association for service providers. Matt is a former El Paso County Human Services Advisory Committee chairperson and a former board member for the American Association on Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities. Previously, he worked as the Director for Children, Youth, and Families for Jefferson County Human Services after transitioning from a career in the restaurant industry. He has a bachelor's in business administration and management and a master's of business administration and healthcare management from Western Governors University. Thrilled to have you here, Matt. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Thanks, Jay. I appreciate it.
So, Matt, why don't you introduce yourself and talk a little bit about Developmental Pathways?
It would be my pleasure. I grew up with a sister with significant disabilities who passed away 8 years ago. Her name was Kelly, and she had muscular dystrophy and cerebral palsy and some other things. Working in the private sector, I understood that I wanted to make a difference based on how I was raised and what my family dynamics look like. But I went into the private sector. I went into the space where a lot of us do in business, where I wanted to make money and make other people money and grow businesses, et cetera.
Sure.
And then there were two catastrophic events that happened pretty quickly that ultimately guided me to where I needed to be. The first was the 2009 recession. So my business partner and I had built a very healthy and robust restaurant and hospitality business. That in about 2 months had gone belly up. So wow. I lost everything, literally. We didn't have anything, lost the business, wow. Lost all of our money that we had invested in it. So I started consulting while I was looking for work. But in 2009, me and about 9 million other people were looking for the same kind of jobs.
Right.
So I had a friend reach out and say, "Hey, would you like to be a consultant?" I work in nonprofits and I work in government, and oh boy, we could really use some folks who understand operations and how to get things done. And so I said, "Yeah, I'd love to give that a go." Started doing that for about a year. And then a peer that I had in the consulting field was going to do a 2-day strategic planning session with this thing called, it was a group of a thing called a community-centered board, which I had never heard of before. CCBs, they're also known as. Because his sister had passed away and he was unable to wrangle the business. So we figured it out. I was able to jump in the last moment. And I quickly realized that it was the best thing that had ever happened to me. Those two things happening in sort of the same small space. I was so impressed by the work that the folks did and that they could use their talents to make a difference in their community. Long story short is I started doing consulting work for Developmental Pathways, which is one of those community-centered boards. Yep. And I'll explain a little bit about what that means in just a second. It's been almost 12 years now, and it's been the highest honor of my career. I noticed how the staff there, they had a heart for their community. Everyone was there because they had a personal connection to the work, or because they were deeply committed to the mission, or making, the world a better place.
Right.
And so, prior to that, again, being a corporate kind of guy, I loved that I was able to use my skill set to really make a difference in the nonprofit space.
Yeah.
And I think at the end of the day, Jay, that our jobs as leaders in the nonprofit segment are to take care of our people so they can take care of the people that we ultimately serve, right? And make that difference. So that's how I got here today.
I love it. It's the classic, when one door closes, another one opens. And
That's
I think
exactly right.
It's a great thing for any nonprofit leader to realize that, at the baseline of what we do, we might be a nonprofit, but we're still a business. So you still have to have that operations background, that finance background, all that stuff that it takes to run a business. Even if your heart's in your mission, you still have to have that background, which had to be a huge advantage for you as you took this step with Developmental Pathways.
That's right. I'd like to think so. Yeah.
So tell me about the organization a little bit, about, the mission, the work that you guys are doing, and explain a little bit about that community center board.
Yeah, I'd love to. So we are probably one of the largest nonprofits in the state of Colorado that folks have never heard of unless you have to, or unless you need us.
Right.
And so, our goal ultimately is to support individuals with disabilities in leading a healthy, safe, person-centered, and integrated life. We want all people to have the opportunity to lead their most meaningful life. And that goes for the folks on our team as well. Because as I spoke about before, right, our job is to serve those who serve the folks in our mission. So we do that by showing up each day with an incredibly dedicated staff. We foster kindness, collaboration, and competency with one another and throughout our community. We ensure that all individuals with disabilities receive the support that they need. A lot of those folks are supported with Medicaid dollars. So those are federal and state dollars. But we also are honored to have an incredible relationship with our counties that we work in, primarily Arapahoe County and Douglas County. And there are mill levy dollars that support residents in those two counties from both of those counties. And we've been doing that for over 20 years now. We focus on customer service, right, as the highest that we can meet, both internally and externally. And we're always trying to cultivate the talents and interests throughout our organization. And again, ultimately, what is the best opportunities and possibilities for people with disabilities? I'm a big fan of framing sort of past, present, future about the organization. So if you don't mind, just really quickly. So this all started almost 60 years ago. We'll celebrate our 60th anniversary next year, which is incredible to say out loud.
That is awesome.
Most days I feel like I've been there for all 60 years, not just the 12, because it's incredible work, but it's tough work as well. It does, yes. But that's also what makes it the most rewarding. But, it started in 1964, the same time that the Civil Rights Act was signed into law. There was a group of really motivated, innovative parents that said, I think we can serve our children in our community, because prior to this, in the 50s, 60s, and before that, it was very common if a child was born with a developmental disability or an intellectual disability to be institutionalized for their lifetime, and never get to participate in their community, go to their churches and go to their schools, and work in their communities. So we were first known as Suburban Community Training and Services Center back in the 60s. Wasn't until 1985 or so that we became Developmental Pathways. Most of what we did early on was education and vocational needs for those kids that were being deinstitutionalized. When we first opened, we served about a dozen folks in the first year. And this year we will serve 9,000 individuals. 9,000 individuals and families in just our community. So there are 20 community-centered boards across the state. We provide services to Arapahoe, Douglas, and Elbert counties, and also the city of Aurora that's in Adams County today. And in the near future, our growth plan is to serve about 17,000 folks, because folks with intellectual disabilities and then other disabilities like physical disabilities, they'll all be served by one single agency.
Wow.
That's a case management agency. And so we hope to be that in the next year or so.
Wow.
So today, right, as I mentioned before, we're working on that trifecta. We call it kindness, competency, and collaboration. We underscore those qualities in everything that we try to do. We provide services in early intervention. So if a child is born with a developmental disability or delay, they can qualify for free to them services. Those are federal and state dollars that pay for those services. So if you have a youngin that's 0 to 3 years old, or somebody who does, who may have a delay, right, may not be keeping up with their peers, folks need to contact Developmental Pathways or the Community Centered Board in their county area for those services and supports in Colorado. We do lots and lots of case management. So service coordination and case management for all of those folks that are on Medicaid, and also for folks that qualify for those local mill levy dollars. Yeah. And so that looks like referrals and education, advocacy and outreach. It's service planning and service coordination and assessments. And right, it's a very complex system with lots of different doors and windows and gates and things that you need to be able to traverse as an individual with a disability or a family member or an advocate for that person. So we help them along the way from start to finish to make sure that they are able to receive the level of services that they need in order to lead their most meaningful life. And as I mentioned before, our future is so bright because we employ some of the hardest working, most incredibly dedicated and talented staff in all of Colorado. If you don't mind, Jay, we just finished a staff engagement survey.
Awesome.
Hot off the presses. I've got a few results. Would you mind if I shared those with you really quickly?
I'd love to hear them.
So we partnered with a national and international organization that over a 3-year rolling average surveyed 95,000 different respondents in the healthcare and social services industries. We had an overall completion rate of 88%, which is well over the national average. We also had a net promoter score, which means that employees are satisfied, loyal, and enthusiastic about our organization. We had an 88% favorable score.
Salute.
Versus an average of about 75%. And teams love our work environment. So they told us, 86% of our team told us that they loved where they worked, that they felt like they were making a difference, et cetera. So again, it's only because of the incredible work of our teams in every day that we're able to do the work that we do.
That is so awesome. Well, I would imagine that when a family finds out they've got a child with some kind of disability, whether it's intellectual, physical, or whatever, it's got to be so overwhelming that you guys can really step in with them. And one of the things I love about the organization is you can step in and walk with them for a lifetime, right?
Literally. That's right. So in our 60th year, we have folks that we have served for their lifetime, 50 plus years or so.
So awesome.
It really is incredible because it's one of the unique spaces in nonprofits. So often nonprofits are more of an emergency room, right? Yep. There's an acute need. So we're going to triage for you and send you back out and hope we never see you again.
That's a super interesting way to phrase that.
Right. And Developmental Pathways is wonderfully unique in that we partner with an individual perhaps for their lifetime. Yeah. Maybe not, right? Those kids in early intervention services, about a third of the folks that we serve. We do, by the way, as I mentioned, one of the largest nonprofits in Colorado, we serve 1 in 4 children in the entire state. Whoa. Because of the population growth. Yeah. If you think about the Denver metro area, not a lot of growth in Denver, right? Because
Right.
it's so landlocked and et cetera. But if you think about the outskirts, right? So we serve all of Arapahoe County and all of Douglas County. Such incredible growth there means families move there. They have babies. And when they have babies, some of those babies need supports, right? So
Right.
we connect them to therapists and other folks that can help that child. So about a third of our kids that we serve every year out of those 3,500 or so families, they never need services again, but about 2/3 do. And so sometimes those are through their local school system. Very often it's a partnership. So they'll receive services through the local school system, but we'll also help them with those Medicaid dollars to connect them to therapies, and whether it's behavioral therapy or speech therapy, and then to really the lifeblood of all the services that exist throughout our state, which are they're PASAs, we call them. It's an acronym that serves for Program Approved Service Agencies. And so those service agencies are the folks who accept the Medicaid dollars and all the red tape and stuff that comes with those dollars, but then they deliver the services. So they help adults with developmental disabilities or physical disabilities to get from home to work if there isn't reliable transportation. They help them to balance their checkbooks. They help them to integrate into the community and to learn how to do different tasks and things that you and I may take for granted. Being able to do, but folks need some extra assistance. So, the provider community is genuinely the lifeblood of the work that is done in Colorado.
Right. So tell me how do people get connected with you? Because I would imagine once that connection is made, again, it's a connection that can lead to a lifetime of support and everything else. But how does somebody initially make a connection with you guys? Is it by referral? Is it word of mouth?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we have an incredibly strong relationship with our county partners. So again, in our area, right, Arapahoe County, Douglas County, Elbert County, and then the part of Aurora that's in Adams County today. So we because of those really strong relationships, we work very closely with the human services teams in those counties. So they're a great place for referrals. We have an incredible relationship with all of the school districts in our area. And so those are great referrals for new kids that move in, from out of state. Lots of folks are migrating to the incredible state that we are blessed to live in. And so as they come to us, we get lots of referrals from doctors' offices, right, when they do those first visits, et cetera. And then there's lots of word of mouth because believe it or not, there are a lot of folks who support their loved one who has a disability and they have no idea that these services are available. It's one of the things that was most exciting to me about joining you today is just to make sure folks understand, start with your county human service departments. There are great links there. We also partner very, very closely with different state entities. There's a state entity with a super silly acronym name that everybody calls HICPUF. And that stands for, right? It sounds like somebody's making that up. Well, I guess somebody did, but that's really what they're called. But that stands for Healthcare Policy and Financing. And so they're responsible for all of the stewardship of every Medicaid dollar that comes from the federal government into the state and then helps to get those dollars out into their communities. So there are lots of great state resources. The best resource for folks, Jay, that are listening today that live in Arapahoe County and Douglas County and Elbert County is our website. So if you don't mind, I'll share that really quickly. That's www.DP for Developmental Pathways, DP, and then COLO for Colorado. So DPCOLO.org. And we have an incredible website. Our internal team has been working for a really long time to make it super accessible, translatable. But right on the front page, you will see all of the different options that you have. Please remember, I'm speaking now to family members who may go to our website, or individuals with disabilities that might. Please remember there are lots of options. So it can really quickly feel like drinking from a fire hose. Take your time, and when in doubt, call our main community line, an intake line, and you'll get a live person to walk you through based on the age of your loved one, based on the possible needs and supports that you have. Let's start you here, and we're going to take you step by step. Because, like I say all the time, you can eat an elephant, but you got to do it one bite at a time. And it's a really, really big undertaking, as you mentioned before. So let us help you to get through all of those steps.
Well, I think one of the things that I love about the organization, and from my limited experience through Adams Camp and from what I've read, is I'm a huge fan of shallow entry points. So it's not intimidating, and it's easy to get into. And I think, you guys have been doing this for a minute, so you really know what you're doing. When you have a staff that's super engaged like that, it naturally creates these shallow entry points that if people reach out, you're there with open arms.
That's exactly right. And that's our goal. And I really like that phrase, by the way. As I mentioned before, so we are serving about 9,000 folks today by July of 2024. So in just about a year, we'll be serving around 17,000 or so, which is part of the state's incredible vision for having one case management agency in your entire area. Today, there are 10 Medicaid waivers. We provide services and supports for the Medicaid waivers for folks with intellectual and developmental disabilities.
Right.
And then those physical disability waivers, like an elderly, blind, and disabled, or someone with a traumatic brain injury, they actually have to go through another door to start. And then they have to choose between those 6 waivers, et cetera. It's an even more complex and complicated system that exists today that won't in July of 2024.
Wow.
So the good news is, our goal is to be that single case management agency for Arapahoe, Douglas, and Elbert County. But with that comes even more choices and opportunities and things to learn for people. So we just can't say it enough, right? Let us help you through that entire process, so that we can ensure that you qualify for, Medicaid dollars are federal and state dollars that are about 50-50, right, for that dollar. But those monies can be used for all of the supports that your loved ones need. So if you can qualify for those, that's great. And then, as I mentioned earlier, Arapahoe and Douglas County have committed over 20 years ago to supporting individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities that are their citizens. And so we help to steward literally millions of additional dollars a year in those counties to directly support unmet needs for folks, undermet needs if they do qualify for some things, but not others. We help support provider agencies, especially through the pandemic. Our community of provider agencies were just incredible
Yeah.
throughout COVID. And I'm delighted to hopefully never speak about that again. But we really we've worked for almost 60 years in our community now to help understand the best way to traverse our whole community. Right. So, you got to call us and let us help you.
Exactly. And that's going back to, that sounds so intimidating. Oh my God, which waiver do I need? How do I find the waiver? You guys can create that bridge, that shallow entry point for people. And that's right. Awesome. So this change coming up, you've been with the organization for a while now. This change that's coming up, would you say it's one of the bigger ones that you've had to lead the organization through?
It is without question. So when I started almost 12 years ago as the COO, the Chief Operations Officer, we were serving about 3,000 folks total. That has since increased from 3,000 to approximately 9,000 this year. But that was over an almost 12-year period, right? The better part of a decade.
Right.
We are going to be onboarding, right? Transitioning folks in services, again, about 8,000 people in a single year, which means that we'll also have to onboard almost 200 new staff in that same time frame. And that is no easy task.
That could impact culture and everything else. But it sounds like you guys have such a strong base that you've got to feel pretty confident that this is all there'll be bumps and everything else like there always is in a transition. But because you've got this great base, your confidence level must be pretty high.
My confidence level is incredibly high because of the incredible leadership team that I'm blessed to get to work with every day.
Awesome.
Who manages the most incredible group of folks throughout the state of Colorado. So we really are truly blessed. It's not an accident, right?
Right.
I always use the word blessed, but to be candid, it's a little bit like parenting, right? You can be blessed with some things, and then you've got to work really, really hard to raise some great kids. An organization is similar to that. So we're blessed to have a great foundation and some great bones throughout our organization, but we've worked really, really hard to solidify. Really, really strong, healthy culture that is a hybrid workforce now, right? We learned some great things, believe it or not, right? I love talking about silver linings. So, the silver linings of the 2009 recession, that if it didn't happen, I'd still be making money running restaurants and hospitality. If my peer's sister hadn't passed at just that space, I wouldn't have had the opportunity to get to work with community center boards in the first place. And so, COVID was that sort of third space with a silver lining where we learned that we can support families better, that we can have happier staff, that we can be more efficient and effective and actually save money in overhead that we then can turn right around and put into our community. All of those things happened, quite frankly, because of COVID. That doesn't excuse away the incredible heartbreak and heartache that happened to so many Americans and Coloradans. But yes, we've taken all of those lessons over the last few years, and we have built an extremely strong team of talented professionals that do an incredible job. And so as we begin to infuse those new staff into our current staff and our current culture, they'll also bring with them some great things that we don't currently do from their current employers and previous employers. So I couldn't be more excited about our potential growth.
The silver linings all come because of strong leadership and making those choices. And again, that leadership is critical for an organization that's going to go through such change like you are. So what really, I think I know the answer to this, but what really keeps you excited moving forward as you're tackling these big challenges that are ahead?
I could not be more excited about being able to impact more lives in our community. So, 9,000 is a really, really big number, but 17,000 is even bigger, right? And I expect, again, with the continued growth of the amazing counties that we get to work in, in a few years after that, we'll be serving 20,000 Coloradans each and every year. And that is some of whom, by the way, right, need the most services and supports. We serve folks, Jay, in some of our provider group homes that we work very closely with. We serve folks that are non-ambulatory. That means they can't move on their own. They're nonverbal. They can't speak on their own, that have significant intellectual and developmental disabilities, but also physical disabilities that require 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week care. And we also serve and support those little 2-year-olds who just need a little extra help to catch up with their peers. So the gambit with which we're able to serve our community is so exciting to me. But I'm energized by that fantastic growth, which I think is what you had already figured, right? But I'm also really, really excited to get to expand our team because there are just there are incredible opportunities for folks who don't just want to help a business make money. They don't just want to check a box and do a thing, but they actually want to make a difference in the lives of other people. I sign my emails. I don't know if you paid attention to that when I sent a thank you email to you for allowing me the opportunity to join you today. But I've signed my emails for 12 years now with be purposeful instead of sincerely or all my best or warm regards. I'm not even sure what a regard is and why it would be warm or cold. But man, I got to tell you, I believe in this life. We only have one real opportunity to live our best life, and it's to be in service to others. And the best way to do that is to have purpose and to do things with purpose. And that is who our team is at Developmental Pathways.
The people that do this work are angels on earth. I don't know how else to describe them. The folks that are working with these folks with severe disabilities, or even with not so severe disabilities, it's got to be a tremendous to be surrounded by those folks.
It's an honor.
Change gears a little bit. Have enjoyed all of this, but really want to get into the last 4 questions here and start with what's something that you will read, listen to, or watch today?
So are these the standard questions that you ask?
These are
everyone?
the Fab 4. Yep.
Okay. So I've listened to your podcast. I really enjoy your podcast. And so,
bless you.
I've done just a little bit of prep work here. It's really hard for me to pick one, right? I have a friend who's a big movie buff. And I was like, okay, if you could only take one of your DVDs out of the house, he's like, well, that's not a fair question. So I'm going to pivot just a little bit, and I'm going to tell you my number one tool for success in the last year as an executive is Blinkist or short form. So there are these 2 apps that you can download and pay a subscription for. We do it throughout the organization for our leaders. And it gives you the, Jay, I feel like I'm older than you, but our generation, if I can say that, about our generation, when we grew up, not that I would ever have used Cliff Notes in high school instead of actually doing the assignment. And then I think my kids had Spark Notes. It's the Cliff's Notes or Spark Notes of executives and folks and adults who are just too busy to read a whole darn book. So I can get through an entire leadership book in about 20 minutes.
Wow.
I can pull out all of the good stuff, share with my team. You can search for all manner of different things. And if you're not a leader, you just want to learn, right? I think folks that are in service to others are also lifelong learners. Yep. One of the books that I just finished yesterday is called The 12 Obsessions of a Great Leader. And it just walks you through slowly but surely each of the different things that really make you a great leader versus a so-so leader or just a manager. So that was a long answer, but my recommendation for anybody would be short form or Blinkist. And that is not a paid partnership by me. Hopefully they'll sponsor your podcast.
Not a sponsored ad, but I'm definitely writing both of those down. Awesome. So who's really been a role model for you in doing this work that you've dedicated yourself to?
So I tried to prep myself so that I didn't sound like a blubbering idiot when you asked that question. And clearly that didn't work.
It's the best part of this question.
Yeah. So sorry in advance for the sniffling and the tears.
Means it's meaningful.
So I've already shared how my life experience in my 50 years has been different, and that's because of my little sister Kelly. So she was born in 1976. And she was my best friend until she passed away 8 years ago. Throughout her entire life, she suffered with significant pain, and you never would have known it. She suffered with significant mobility issues, eating issues. She was probably 75 pounds when she passed away. Wow. And every day she had a positive attitude and she made a difference. Oh, every single day of her life, she did those things. So she was a force to be reckoned with. She wouldn't take no for an answer. She did work in public policy and graduated top of her class at University of Arizona. Go Wildcats!
Go Wildcats!
And anyway, so she was and is my role model. And on those days that are really, really hard, like if we get it wrong for a family, and we let somebody down or we miss a thing, I'm never upset. I'm never upset at our team because we employ humans. They're incredible, but they're human. But I feel like for just a minute, I let my sister down. So that's the motivation that keeps me going.
Speaking of angels on earth, right?
Right.
So other than Developmental Pathways, and you work with a ton of different organizations, is there any other organizations out there that you really admire the work they're doing or want to give a shout out to?
100%. So real quick. So DP is my favorite organization, without question, because of our staff, our leaders, the folks that we serve, the community that we get to make a difference in. But then I would collectively give a huge and incredible shout out to those PASAs that I mentioned before, the provider agencies. There are over 400 different provider agencies just in our area. Wow. So, we only serve 3.5 or 4 counties out of 64 in the whole state. Yes, we're the biggest. Yes, it's a really big area. There's about 1.2 million folks total that live out of the 6 million or so in Colorado. So we're a really big part of the state. But there are over 400 agencies. Folks like Continuum of Colorado, and Parker Personal Care and Wellspring in Douglas County and Tall Tales Ranch, and all of these incredible provider agencies that are willing to put up with all of the heartache and headache, all of the things that you. And by the way, now I've just mentioned 4 of the 400, and now I feel like I need to list you the other 396.
96, right?
This shout out is for all of you, I promise. But Continuum of Colorado is near and dear to us, Jay, because we, community center boards for 55 years or so were a direct service provider and a case management agency. That philosophically doesn't make a whole lot of sense, and it didn't to the federal government or to Medicaid. And so now we've had to split those companies. So they used to be part of our organization for a really long time. So anywho, but for sure the providers, the provider agencies, and that's where, right, the folks that you mentioned before, that's where they work every single day.
Right.
Those
They're
direct
the ones doing the work.
DSPs. Yeah, the DSPs, we call them, are direct support professionals.
Yeah.
That do that work every single day to help folks live their best life.
That's awesome. And we went over a little bit before, but last one is, if anybody wants to learn more about DP, support what you guys are doing. I don't know if you do volunteers or whatnot, but how does somebody really become part of the DP family or learn more about you guys?
So thanks for asking. We as I mentioned, our website before is the best place to go. How to get involved, right? How to engage. There's a donate button. All of those monies go to unmet and undermet needs. There are volunteer opportunities throughout the year. We can connect you with provider agencies that have, right, all of that space for volunteer opportunities. We have an entire community engagement and community outreach team that work to help folks feel like they can be more connected. And then obviously, and of course, the reason that we exist is to make sure that folks with disabilities are able to lead their most meaningful life. So if we have anybody listening today who is disabled in any way and would like some more services and supports or information around that, dpcolo.org is the place to start if you live in Arapahoe, Douglas, and Elbert counties. I'm also told from folks who are a lot younger than me, Jay, that we've got something called social channels.
Social channels.
That's like FaceTube and the Twitter link. Just kidding. So things like Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter. I like to feel older than I am sometimes, or even Instagram. That's a thing, Jay. And if you'd like more information, it's a pretty easy phone number to remember. If you don't like websites or you just don't have the time, can I share the phone number really quickly? It's 303-360-3700. 6600. So 303-360-6600. And if there are any community providers listening, we're always looking for new partnerships to help individuals with disabilities thrive. So please feel free to reach out.
Awesome. Well, we'll put all that in the show notes with links, and I would recommend following those social channels. A lot of joy to be found there. You can never get enough joy. I've had the privilege of knowing about DP for a while. You guys really are one of those kind of backbone, I would call them, organizations that really prop up our community. So keep up the great work. Godspeed, and thanks for being here, Matt.
It's my pleasure, Jay. And as I mentioned before we started taping, I just wanted to take a moment, if I could, listen to a lot of podcasts. I'm in the car a whole heck of a lot for going from meeting to meeting. There aren't a lot of podcasts that help folks understand some of the incredible organizations that exist, that are doing incredible work to make their communities better. So I really appreciate you highlighting nonprofits and making that your focus area, and hope you keep doing it for years to come.
It's my privilege to be able to have these conversations. So, Matt, thanks so much.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening, and thanks to Matt for the dive into the amazing developmental pathways. This podcast was brought to you by JC Charity Services. If you'd like to learn how we can bolster your efforts and help your team achieve its goals, I'd love to have a conversation with you. You can find me at makingourworldbetter.com. To learn more about developmental pathways and the great work Matt and his team are doing, or to have them help you navigate how to connect with services, visit dpcolo.org or call them at 303-360-6600. Check the show notes for links, and if you enjoyed this podcast, we'd be grateful if you'd share it with a friend. Until next time, I hope you're inspired to find a way to make our world better.